Hello everybody, this is Bird Brain. We're here. We are nerdy for the birdies. The Philadelphia Eagles defeat the Jacksonville Jaguars 28-23. What started out as a beautiful blowout turned into a nail-biting win, and there's a lot of things to talk about, good and bad. So I'm going to kind of start with the bad, and we're going to flow through the good. And there's two bad things I want to highlight. And I think the topic of conversation on everybody's mind is the aggressiveness in this game by Nick Sirianni and this team. Going for it on fourth down, going for 2-point conversions. And before I give my full thoughts on how aggressive they were, I kind of want to have a conversation about aggressiveness with analytics. And I'm not going to literally show analytics, but I'm going to just have a general talk about it. A lot of coaches nowadays talk about analytics. And what analytics are is a collection of statistics from all around the league that basically drive and determine situational outcomes throughout the league. And when it comes to analytical outcomes in the league, teams will make decisions based on what the analytics favor or what they don't. The reason why some teams may go for it on a particular down is because the analytics say you should, and it increases your likelihood of winning. The problem with analytics is that it's just pure numbers. There's nothing human about analytics. And what I mean by that is, analytics does not factor in who is doing what. I'll give you an example, right? Like, take the tush push, a staple of this offense. Not every team runs it successfully, and not every team runs it at as high of a clip as the Eagles. So, it has a high success rate, but a lot of that is skewed because of how successful the team was, which ironically they weren't today, but we'll have that conversation in a sec. But it's a play that, for us it works a lot, so we should always run it a lot. But other teams don't. The Chiefs don't. I remember one time the Giants ran it and like 2 players got injured on the same play. The Cardinals don't run it with Kyler. The Panthers don't run it with Bryce Young. So it's one of those things where analytics say one thing, but the teams do other things because of their own situational means and needs. And now I'm going to bring it back to this game. And it just feels like sometimes the Eagles are aggressive, and some of it makes sense, and sometimes it just feels like they're being overly aggressive. And when it's getting to the point that you're subtracting points off the board. Now, some criticism can fall for execution on these things, but the fact of the matter is, right, the Eagles cost themselves roughly 9+ points in this game from taking away 2-point conversion, or going for 2 instead of kicking the extra point, going for it on fourth down and field goal range. It just made weird decision after weird decision, and it kind of felt like sometimes the way I play in Madden, where like sometimes you're goofing off and you're like, you know what, I'll go for 2 here because I can, I'll go for it here because I can. And then you miss it. And then you're like, well, I have to now go for 2 again to try to get, to make up for my missed point. And then you miss it again. So now, instead of only being down 1 point, now you're down 2 points. And then it's to the point now where, now you have to go for 2 because you're starting to trail and you're starting to screw around too much in the game and it's not going, and it just turns into a mess. And sometimes it causes you to lose. Now, it hasn't today, but we've seen this team be aggressive in some way, shape, or form, and it has led to things that have not worked. It's 4th and inches. Why is Jalen rolling out 10+ yards back from where the line to gain is? That just doesn't make sense. And I could talk through every decision, aggressive decision the Eagles made, whether it paid off or didn't. And look, I don't mind when this team is aggressive, but there are times when they're overly aggressive. And especially considering this is an area that Nick himself is specializing in because of his new role on this team, he has to be very, very, very truthful. And the fact of the matter is, some of this is just simply, it didn't work. You run the tush push, it's one of your most successful plays, it was not a very good day for it. So I understand its failures. So logically, they're like, okay, the tush push isn't working, so we gotta go to other things. And the other things they call it didn't work. But I think that decision making mounted on top of the execution problems made it harder to win this game and made this game a lot closer than it should have. I mean, this game at one point was 22-0, and within a few minutes it was 22-16. And while it was 22-0, it could have been 20 5-0. It could have been 26 to, I forget what the numbers really could have been, but it's one of those things where I understand it, but it's like after a point in time, you gotta start adjusting to it. Now, for my second point, I want to talk about penalties, because we've talked about them before. Penalties are another way that this team kind of beats itself in games. And there's so many times that they'll have a good play, and then there's a penalty. You know, the Eagles line up for 4th and 1 early in the game on their opening drive, and they come up with this really cool version of the tush push, which we did see later on, and it looked like it would have worked. And it didn't work because, you know, you get a penalty. And I think the second time they ran it, it wasn't super successful. Like, Jalen got the first, but it wasn't anything crazy. And I look at that, and my honest opinion of that is that, yeah, I mean, it worked, but it's like, imagine if, like, the Jags were just not expecting it at all, because that's the first time they kind of ran, like, this QB run, where they had Devontae motion out, like, at the very end of it, and then they have Jalen run to the left. Well, that second time they ran it, the Jags knew what was coming, so they were better prepared to stop it. And we just kind of see, again, penalties just so often. It was more so offensively, especially on the offensive line, just false starts here and there. And it adds up, and it makes drives more complicated than they need to be. I mean, we're just trying to run clock and end the game. What are people doing just taking these penalties and hurting ourselves in these situations? I mean, in the red zone, just all the other spots of the field, it's frustrating. And as a team, we need to be smarter, and I think we should be smarter. Because as much as the players are frustrated about things that happen, some of this does fall on ourselves. And a lot of that is, you know, penalties. Stupid penalties that could be easily erased. And if you play cleaner, you probably finish more drives in the end zone, and it's a lot easier. Right? That's just the end all be all. And you just have to be better and ready sooner. Now, those are the two negative things, and I know that was a lot, but we're going to get to the positive things. And a mostly very positive thing, barring one very weird play that I don't even really feel like talking about. Saquan Barkley had an amazing day. Scored his first couple of touchdowns in Philadelphia. Loved the throw that he caught there on that, I believe it's a wheel route, or it's an H-back up and go, I think they call it. Really good play there. 3rd and 17, I mean, that's just terrible defense by Jacksonville. There's absolutely no reason why Saquon should score, but he did. And he made that obviously amazing backwards hurdle play that is going viral. So he had an amazing day in the offense. I'm slightly concerned about the amount of touches, because I could definitely tell he was getting worn out in this game, and I think some of that is because of, AJ's injury. And I just wonder, is there a way we can mitigate some of his touches a little bit? Maybe get some more tick for Gainwell or even Shipley, just to kind of balance it out. I mean, he is by far the best back on this team, but I wonder if maybe we can find a way to balance it out a little bit so he's fresh by the time he gets to the playoffs, because, you just don't want him to get run down too much, but he's having an incredible season. But yeah, really good game from Saquon. I don't really have a lot to say because I feel like I praise him a lot on this show. So let's go back to defense, or go to defense. I guess I haven't talked much about it. I really just want to shout out the linebackers. Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond had an amazing game today. Both of them had interceptions. Nakobe getting his first career interception. I believe Zach Bond has had an interception before. I'd have to double check that. I didn't look. The defense as a whole played pretty solid today, but I thought, I really thought that, especially to see the linebacker play. I mean, this is the best linebacker play I've seen in years. I mean, I think this is even better than TJ Edwards and Kaiser White in 2022. And the growth that Nakobe has had, there was a lot of concern about him coming into the season, and we've seen reasons to be concerned. I mean, he had a really good day, and he didn't just have a good day because he was cutting forward on blitzes and blowing up screens and making tackles for loss. No, he had some good coverage plays. I think he was in coverage against Evan Ingram, and he broke up a pass. He had another. I feel like he had another pass breakup or some kind of good coverage play later on in the game, and obviously the interception at the end. And I usually don't do this before I record these post-game ponders, but I did end up listening to his. I did end up listening to his press conference, and he referenced the idea that he recognized the play because at the public practice, he got beat on this play by Gainwell, and if you want to see the play, it's in my public practice video. It's the first video on this channel. It's one of the last plays in it. Nakobe gets beat by Gainwell on the play, and I remember the sentiment about Nakobe is that, oh, he's not doing so well in coverage, he can't cover. And he talked about how much he learned from that play. He learned from seeing the Eagles run similar plays in practice and learning the things, talking to Gainwell and Jalen and Saquan. And once he recognized it, he was able to diagnose it, made a great play on it, got a game-winning interception, got his first career interception. And if Nakobe keeps playing like this, I mean, I don't want to overreact to a game, but this might be a franchise linebacker. And Zach Bond might be up there with him, and he was all over the place. He was tackling, he was knocking down passes, he got a pick, he was all over the place. And having a linebacker duo this good, it's just been such a rarity for this team, and it speaks to the coaching that they are receiving, and it speaks to how good this roster has become. My final point is on Jalen Hurts, and I don't have a lot of really anything interesting to say. It's just continuing to marvel how well he's playing. I thought this was a little bit of a shakier game. He had that near pick, I believe, to Cisco that was dropped. But other than that, he's playing at a really high level, and it's not just throwing the ball, it's running the ball, it's everything, and he just looks amazing. And I just can't fault him really for much of anything that happened today. I thought he played out of his mind at times. And again, you know, we talked about the turnovers for Jalen. He hasn't had a turnover since week 4. He hasn't thrown an interception since week 3. And I will even make the statement, he hasn't thrown an interception in which I truly believe it's 100% his fault since week 2. He has become much better at taking care of the football. He's starting to trust his guys more. We saw a lot of guys get involved today. Jahan Dotson had that incredible catch. Johnny Wilson almost had a touchdown. They just took it away because he pushed off, even though I didn't think he really did. It's good to see Jalen really get comfortable in this offense, and the Eagles have to do everything in their power, I think, to keep Kellen Moore in this building, because they're starting to really build something with this offense. And again, when everybody's healthy and all together, that team is going to look really special. So we now come to the end where I do my player of the game, and I'll be honest, I could name like 5 different players, but I am going to give my player of the game to Nakobe Dean. Because as good as Saquon was, he did have that quote-unquote fumble. I've given it to Zach Bond before, but Nakobe Dean, to step up the way he did on that final drive, get that pick, and just have some overall solid plays in general, I'm really proud of him. And I hope he can continue this and continue to be consistent, because, man, this is fun. But yeah, just to kind of sum up the game as a whole, you know, there are things that have to be cleaned up. The team has to be smarter on their aggressive decisions, and they have to be cleaner with their penalties. This game, if they did those 2 things, is a rout. It was never close. I mean, Jacksonville was literally shut out until about 8 minutes into the third or something like that. They just didn't have anything. And Jacksonville, I'm not a huge, like, oh, you gotta beat inferior opponents thing, because in the NFL, anyone can beat you any day. We've seen many of those games before. Dolphins 2019, Cardinals 2023, need I go on? You know, it's just one of those things that I do worry about down the line against better teams that don't make those mistakes. Like, can they take better advantage of it? Similar to that of, like, what Tampa did earlier this season. So, who knows? The Eagles have a date with Dallas next week, which is looking pretty interesting, with Dak and I believe CD injured in their game this week. So we'll see what happens in Dallas. But if they can continue winning, that Thursday night game against Washington in about a week and a half is looking like a really important game for this division. Anyways, this is Bird Brain. Fly, Eagles, fly. See you around.